Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. And if you're listening for the very first time, yes, you heard us correctly. This is an all things Charles Band podcast. So if you're just finding the show for the first time right now, welcome. We're so happy that you tracked the show down and you're here to listen. And if you're coming back week after week because you love Empire and Full Moon, well, welcome also. Just so happy to have everyone here who's listening. My name is Jared Hornbeck. I'm one of your hosts, but you can call me Lasagna. And, you might think that I'm doing this on my own. Luckily, I am not. This prison is way too dark and dank and desolate for me to be scouring these halls alone. Who's here with me?
Well, this is Steve Guntley, and I think, frankly, we've been cellmates for too long at this point, because this is the second episode in a row where you've taken my intro to the word. I wrote it down. I'm Steve Guntley, but you can call me Lasagna. I wrote it down. This happened last week too, twice in a row. So I think we're getting that kind of cellmate synchronicity there going on. So we're in the trenches together of Full Moon and Empire. This is the podcast. It's all about solitary ovens, killer pipes, and barbed wire strangulations. That's because this is a podcast about Prison, a very hard to Google 1988 thriller that is either launched or served as a pit stop for a lot of like major careers kind of coming through this movie. At least major if you're a character actor nerd like I am. Holy shit, what a fun movie. I cannot wait to get into it. And I'm very excited that we have a super fun guest with us today to talk about this film. Who's here with us today, Jared?
So we have a return guest, second return guest so far on the show. The people asked and we responded. They said, we need more Scott Weinberg on the show. Pit and the Pendulum, highlight of last year. They said this. These are verbatim quote, like comments and things that we got. Some people even said you saved the episode, but we won't get into that. But anyway, yeah, Scott Weinberg is back again to talk about another movie with us. He is an amazing podcaster, critic, writer, filmmaker, just a jack of all trades, really. Scott, thank you so much for coming back on again. Really, we thought like once we were done with people, they were going to leave us forever, but here you are.
No, I'm a regular listener. I love the show. I think that you guys, like my favorite podcasts, are historians of schlock. You're both critical when you need to be, but mostly respectful of the art. And I mean, even the lowest grade B movie could be made with a lot of heart and passion, and it takes committed movie nerds to see that.
Well, we appreciate it, and we're thrilled to have you back. You're one of the hosts you're the host of the show Overhated, which is exploring movies that fell through the cracks, got a bad reputation, or just otherwise were ignored. And I feel like this movie would fall. Maybe I don't even think this would count as being an overhated movie.
If somebody would, if one of my prospective guests on Overhated, patreon.com/Scott E. Weinberg. If one of my guests were to suggest Prison, I would allow it, but I would first say it's more completely over forgotten than it. I would probably still allow it if the guest wanted it that badly. But yeah, I don't know if it would qualify as overhated as more as just, except for horror fans, completely unknown.
Yeah, underseen, undervalued, and I think even the two of us are introduced to this movie. Maybe I think we were both familiar with the title. We knew that Renny Harlin made a movie back in the 80s before Nightmare 4 that was like just like a prison set horror film. That's all I knew about it. I didn't know it by reputation or anything else. And it's become one of those late Empire movies that has been pretty efficiently wiped from the earth. It's kind of hard to find this movie.
Which is ironic, right? Because it's just a straightforward chiller. It's not tongue-in-cheek. It's not campy. It's obviously, low budget, but it's made to be an ominous, off-putting, disturbing horror film.
Yeah, Steve mentioned that. Steve said that he knew that it was a horror movie set in a prison. I'll go one further and say I didn't even know it was a horror movie set in a prison. I knew Renny Harlin made a movie called Prison. It was his first American movie. That much information
it was
I know.
A documentary about the American prison system in 1986.
Yeah. I said they're going to bring this first time American Finnish filmmaker over to make this documentary. And I thought it was like a drama. I thought it was like a gritty drama. And I wasn't really until I got the Empire of the Bees book and saw really looked closely at the poster art for it, that I realized that it was actually a supernatural horror movie set in a prison. And it makes complete sense when you think about it now. But all I knew was Renny Harlin made this movie. It's called Prison. It predates Nightmare 4. It was sort of one of the things that helped him get that job, at least is my understanding, timeline wise.
Yes.
And so that was really all I knew going into it.
Well, let me correct you before your listeners do.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Technically speaking, well, chronologically and just factually speaking, Prison was his second film. He made a little scene but theatrically released horror action film in '85 called Born American.
Yes,
which I actually saw on VHS a few years after it came out. I believe it's about 3 backpackers who inadvertently wander across the Russian border and get it. Is that right? Yeah.
I believe so. It's kind of like a Red Dawn riff that was written for Chuck Norris, wound up starring his son.
I did not know. That's why I like this show. I knew a little, and you knew more. That's great.
Yeah. That was kind of an interesting movie because that technically is still a Finnish film. So like it wasn't so Prison is his American debut, but
there we go.
Born American.
And just to get off the fact that I was half wrong, I think the only reason this film, I'm sure there's reasons why it barely got released. I never saw this in a theater. I don't think it played Philly at all. It's the title.
It's so generic. I was saying that.
Why not call it Death Prison, Horror Prison, Ghost Prison, Prison of No Return?
Ghost Prison. If Ghost Prison was a movie that existed, I would have rented the shit out of that movie when I was a kid. If this movie was called Ghost Prison with the same cover art,
I would call it like the Slammer or something. I don't know, something cool like that. That's a little bit more distinctive. But I had a hard time even Googling this movie. Obviously, like SEO wasn't a concern in 1988, but like I'm Googling it now. It's just like, all right, prison. It's just going to give me a list of prisons. All right, prison movie. All right, well, here's Shawshank Redemption, and here's all this.
You know what? I learned this many years ago. When a title is that generic, always just search the director.
See, that's where I eventually had to land. And even then, it was like 4 or 5 articles down.
Well, you make a good point, Steve. It is a generic name. However, the proposed name for the movie beforehand was Horror in the Big House.
No.
And so I think Prison wins.
That sounds like
those are my 2 options, man. But I wish there were more prison set horror films.
It's such a great setting for a horror film. Let me throw out a couple of stats and some about this movie because I was able to dig a little deeper in this one. Prison was released March 4th, 1988. It's directed by Renny Harlin, and it's written by Irwin Yablans and C. Courtney Joyner, making his Empire debut, I believe. He's so
fascinating because Irwin Yablans, your listeners will probably know, is the producer on Halloween, Fade to Black, lots of good stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh, we have some stories about this guy.
And C. Courtney Joyner, I mean, most people, isn't he still producing? Wasn't he involved with the After Dark slate?
I believe so.
Am I thinking of a different Courtney?
C. Courtney Joyner is a very prominent writer and sometimes director in Full Moon during this time. I think he's still with the company, like on and off, but he wrote he wrote Puppet Master 3, which is one of the best of that franchise. He wrote and directed The Lurking Fear, a couple of other movies. He wrote Trancers 2 and 3. He wrote 3, because 2 was kind of weak, and he wrote Trancers 3 and helped kind of give it some structure. But he's awesome. He shows up a lot around the early phases of Empire. This movie stars Lane Smith, Viggo Mortensen, Chelsea Field, Tom Everett, Lincoln Kilpatrick, Tommy Tiny Lister, Larry Flash Jenkins, Andre DeShields, and Kane Hodder. All right, we have so many huge names to talk about.
By the way, can I correct myself? Sorry.
Please.
Go for it.
The founder of the After Dark film slate was one Courtney Solomon.
Courtney Solomon. Okay.
Right. So not Courtney Joyner. I apologize to all. Not all Courtneys are the same.
They are not.
Hashtag not all Courtneys.
Right.
So obviously the big name that we need to talk about in this cast first and foremost is now 3-time Oscar nominee Viggo Mortensen, who at this point was just a young Danish actor who'd been in like 2 or 3 things. I think he was like a thug in Witness and like had a couple of like small walk-on.
He's a sweet Amish man in Witness.
Yeah, he's an Amish guy.
Amish guy. For whatever reason, I thought no. Danny Glover is a thug.
Yeah, he's not on the side of Danny Glover.
Danny Glover's a dirty cop. Yeah.
To be clear, I don't.
The only thugs in Witness are the ones who are messing with the Amish. I don't know who plays them. Probably somebody.
But yeah, so he is a very interesting guy. He's kind of a peculiar intensity, and he's got this hard to place accent because he's sort of from all over. He's born in New York. His parents are American and Danish, and he grew up in Denmark, Venezuela, Argentina, Spain, and the UK. So his accent is a real pastiche. He's always one of those guys.
Always liked him. You know, he's one of those guys who's in like almost. He's in so many movies, and then occasionally he'd pop out like in Carlito's Way. You were like, "Damn, look at him go! He's amazing."
Yeah. And he's one of these guys. He showed up in Lord of the Rings in 2001, and everyone's like, "Where the hell did this guy come from?" And he'd been acting steadily for like 20 years at that point. Like he had almost 20 years. He'd just been kind of like a steadily rising character actor, and he's always really good at playing like slightly off, slightly sadistic guys. You know, like he's in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. He's in Young Guns 2.
If you want just a fascinating read.
Yeah,
Viggo Mortensen's Wikipedia page. He's
all over.
Actor, I mean, he's a painter. He's a poet. He's published like I don't know, 15 or more books. He's a musician. Dude does a little bit of everything.
It's pretty amazing. And I mean, he's one of these guys who absolutely could be like a major marquee movie star off of Lord of the Rings, like in a big way. And then he just never really went that route outside of like Hidalgo and Green Book. Most of the movies he does are like Cronenberg movies, like weird little indie films. Like I really like his career, and I really like the kind of strange little niche he's carved for himself. But yeah, so Charles Band talks about meeting Viggo Mortensen in his autobiography. He remembers him fondly. He said he was far and away the best actor they read for the role. And he recalls a moment where young Viggo came up to him and like very shyly asking for an advance on his paycheck so that he could pay his rent, which is a nice story. Apparently he was just very nice and easy to work with. But this is also, as we mentioned, the big American debut of a 28-year-old Finnish filmmaker named Renny Harlin. As we mentioned, he'd only directed one film at this point over in Finland, but that was a very buzzy movie. It was actually the most expensive movie ever produced in Finland at that time for a whopping $2 million. So it was still a pretty small movie. And I think it made like $3 million in the States, which is not a blowout, but it's also like, all right, you took something incredibly small, you made something stylish and dumb and like turned a slight profit on it. Let's see what you can do with a little bit more money. It brought him to the attention of a producer that we mentioned already named Erwin Jablans, who has become kind of a minorly important figure for Full Moon at this time. Now,
if you ask Erwin Jablans himself, he will tell you that he came up with the idea for Halloween.
Yes.
He will tell you that the Babysitter Murders was his baby, his idea. John Carpenter was just a hired hand.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely one of those kind of like irascible old Hollywood.
He's a cigar chomping producer. Like,
absolutely.
That's what I picture. Every interview I've ever seen with him, like that's the energy I get from
his
him.
body of work and Carpenter's body of work. We can extrapolate what we like.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, no disrespect, but the guy did Roller Boogie. He did Hell Night, which is fun. He did Blood Beach. Well, you know, while Carpenter was off making like Escape from New York and The Thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I like Blood Beach and Hell Night, both of those.
So that's true. I like a lot of this stuff. Yeah,
and I'm the world's biggest Roller Boogie fan. No, I've never seen Roller Boogie. I don't know.
And he also did Tourist Trap, which is fun too.
Oh yeah,
and that's how he kind of crossed paths with Charles Band. They worked together on Tourist Trap, and like Charles Band in his autobiography recalls like that Jablans was this kind of difficult old grump, but he kind of liked him and he helped get Tourist Trap out there and made it kind of a small hit that it was. So when Irwin's company, Compass International Films, went under in around 1982 or 83, he came to Charles Band for some work, and Charles Band threw him a lifeline. But the problem was he was going to be working with his brother and partner, Frank Jablans. And according to Band's autobiography, these two guys hated each other's fucking guts so bad that the barely a day could go by without them having a huge, massive screaming match in the hallways at the Empire Studios. One fight actually arose over this movie. Irwin was incensed when he found out that his brother Frank was also attempting to do a prison movie at the same time, a movie that was wound up being called Buy and Sell, C-E-L-L. We'll discuss that at a future date. That is a prison comedy with Robert Carradine and Malcolm McDowell. So I don't really know much about that. So really, these two movies could not be more different. But either way, it led to them almost coming to blows. And Frank was not the only one that Irwin Yablans fought with. Despite strongly advocating for Renny Harlin to come on and be the film's director, the two of them were at each other's throats pretty much from day one. Band describes it that Renny Harlin was 28 and brash and thought he knew everything, and Irwin was just impossible and aggressive and pushy. Now, Irwin Yablans was insisting on directing all the second unit footage for this movie. Renny Harlin didn't want to let him do that, but he did want him to get out of his hair. So he said, fine, go ahead and do this, but I want you to get this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot, this shot exactly right. Like, he gave him this whole list, told him exactly what to get. And not only did Yablans go out and shoot completely different footage, he also added an insert shot of himself holding a sign and flipping the bird saying, "Fuck you, Renny Harlin." So they did not get along great. It doesn't sound like it was the best working environment. Coupled with the fact that they were shooting this movie in rural Wyoming in an actual decommissioned prison. You can kind of tell from just the exteriors of this movie that this facility is not in great condition.
Not just decommissioned. I mean, I think I read this on Wikipedia or a source from Wikipedia, but like they had free reign to like destroy shit.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, they did not need to be precious about the environment, because the moment
apparently the facility was going to be destroyed in the next year or 6 months or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there's like, yeah, whatever.
What a wild situation, right? Like, you're filming a movie about a prison in an abandoned prison where you have free reign to tear the place apart, but the majority of the extras in the movie with you are actual prisoners, and there are legitimate armed guards who are waiting in case anything gets out of hand. Like, what a kind of surreal experience that must have been too.
Yeah,
and I read that they had to live there too.
Yeah, not only that, but apparently one of the inmates was already a SAG member.
Yes. Okay, the guy who plays Rhino in this, who's kind of the prison bully, he was I don't know what he was in prison for, but a lot of the extras in this movie were inmates from the Wyoming prison system. They just kind of brought them in, put them in cells, and let them shoot around them. And he happened to have an up-to-date SAG card for a couple of like bit roles he'd had in action films, and they gave him a speaking role. And they cast as his, for lack of a better term, prison bitch. They cast Mickey Yablans, the young son of Irwin Yablans. So, there's an interesting casting decision there. But I thought that actor was really good. Like, he definitely brought a lot of authenticity, and he was like intimidating and scary. So I thought that was a cool casting choice.
Agreed.
But,
yeah.
Renny Harlin, a little bit more about him. I've got a big soft spot for Renny Harlin. I don't know what
Absolutely
you call on him.
I am what you call a Renny Harlin apologist.
Even as apologists and or anthropologists of B-movie cinema, he's made some I really don't like. But for the most part, I like the guy's output. He makes popcorn stuff and fun B-movie stuff.
But I just think, like, with Renny Harlin. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just saying there's an argument that his Nightmare on Elm Street is the best one. Some people may. I think Dream Warrior still edges it for me, but it is.
Yeah, I think 3 and 4 are very good. Yeah.
That's not Renny Harlin's fault. Like, that movie is a byproduct of a very apparent writer strike that was happening. Yeah. And if they had waited another year and that script got a couple more drafts and polishes, with Renny Harlin adding the polish behind the camera, it could have been the best one. I make that argument a lot. It's not. But it.
You think there would have been more or less dog piss?
Well, I mean, hopefully more. I mean, that's my barometer for how much I like a movie. So it's
every once in a while I throw
sheer
out that
volume
fact.
of dog piss.
Is that part 4? Is that
my girlfriend hasn't seen any of the Nightmare movies yet, which is a huge failure on my part as her boyfriend. But we're gonna get to it. But she every once in a while I like to drop the fact that in part 4, Freddy is resurrected by flaming dog piss, and she never believes me. So
yeah, Renny Harlin, I feel like he's a super talented guy behind the camera. He knows how to frame shots, knows how to move the camera around to tell a story. I think he's really good at it. Every Christmas, basically every Christmas, I watch The Long Kiss Goodnight.
I love it. I love The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of his films, almost all of them could qualify for overhated.
A little bit.
I'm definitely going to be doing Fort Fairlane. I've already done Cutthroat Island. Box office wise, you could argue Long Kiss Goodnight. Deep Blue Sea is a movie that everybody calls a guilty pleasure. Why? There's no guilt involved. That's just a fun movie.
Once a certain amount of people are referring to something as a guilty pleasure, it can no longer
I don't know. I think for
guilty pleasure.
I think for a lot of people, guilty pleasure just stems from, I'm embarrassed to say I like something silly.
Yeah. Right. And it's also seeming to stem from the idea that that movie doesn't know it's funny. I would argue that movie is very aware.
Yes, when sometimes people think sometimes people think they're smarter than the film, which I guess people are smarter than films. That's fair, but
people are not smarter than those sharks. I'll tell you that.
Right? Yeah, they're not smarter than. But yeah, to watch something that broad and goofy and willfully silly, and think, they didn't mean for this to be. The Killer Clowns gets that a lot too.
Yeah, like
where people like backhand compliment it and say, it's so bad it's good, guilty pleasure. I'm like, are you insane? Killer Clowns is like Citizen Kane of that genre, of that genre. Exactly the film they tried to make. There's nothing in that film that is like, oops, it's a little too broad. No, they meant that.
It's all very intentional.
I feel that about Return of the Living Dead too. I feel like I heard somebody recently talk in describing Return of the Living Dead, talk about like, I feel like they said something along the lines of it being a zombie movie, but because it was the 80s, it was cheesy and unintentionally funny. And I'm like, did we watch the same movie?
Yeah,
because that movie, everything is intentional.
He's had such a fascinating career too, because he'll do like B-level movies out of the, in like Romania. Then he'll do like major Hollywood stuff. Then he'll go vanish. He'll do like a found footage horror film in Devil's Past. Then The Legend of Hercules, which ain't great, but that's a major studio release. It's just fascinating, his career. And then he's directed in China features. Now he just recently directed an entire trilogy of the sequels to The Strangers. 3 of them.
And they're all going to be rolling out, I think, this year, which is really interesting. I feel like he's just never quite gotten over Cutthroat Island, which
I love that he's just that eclectic. And if I could, I'll happily plug his recent action movie, The Bricklayer. That is a fun action film.
Okay, I did not know that was him. Yep. No, we covered Cutthroat Island on my other show, Cinema Arcade, recently, and it's like even that movie, which gets such a bad rap, like, and it's all tied with like box office failure and everything like that. That's a fun, stupid movie. Like, and
part of me wishes I loved Cutthroat Island, like I love, like, I don't know, Popeye or Flash Gordon, where I just legitimately think they're great, underappreciated films. I think Cutthroat Island has some great action moments and a few chuckles. But I mean, I wish I liked it more. I wish but it was a great episode of Overhated. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, I bet. But that's kind of where Renny Harlin is, and I think like you can see even at this point, he's always been a very polished producer of like
prolific as hell too.
Prolific as hell. Yeah, he works a lot and he makes movies that look very cinematic for small budgets, and I think that's what they were able to achieve here. This movie, just in its staging and its framing and everything, like it really does look far more professional than a lot of the stuff that Empire was putting out at this time, where they were really just sort of trying to scrape together what they could out of the budgets that they had. The actors are all like very strong. I mean, let's look at this.
This is a great ensemble.
They have like Tiny Lister Jr., who one of my favorites, former professional wrestler, became Debo on Friday and a bunch of other amazing movies.
Well, this is why your favorite movie is No Holds Barred, right?
Oh, easily my favorite movie. Yeah. I mean, you have Andre DeShields.
Tiny Lister was always one of those guys who showed up as mostly as a comedic villain.
Yeah.
And there was nobody would ever accuse the guy of being Laurence Olivier, not as an actor. But man, did he, to borrow a more modern phrase, he always got the assignment.
He did.
He always knew he had a great sense of humor buried under that very intimidating exterior.
Yeah, and he knew how to really work it. And I mean, you get a couple of guys like that in here. You also get like playing the voodoo guy in this movie is Andre DeShields, who is considered by some to be maybe the best Broadway actor to ever live. Like his career is unbelievable. He's like he's I think just barely shy of an EGOT at this point. And then like Lane Smith is the warden getting top billing. I love Lane Smith. I'm the world's biggest My Cousin Vinny fan, and he's the opposing counsel in that movie. And I think I just always love it when he shows up. And then of course the Puppet Master Castle Freaks debut of Kane Hodder. Maybe the best known, if not the best Jason. Hard to argue. I don't know. He's like the best Jason in some of the worst Jason movies.
Yeah, he's the Timothy Dalton of Jasons.
Yes, yeah.
He's the most prevalent Jason. I'll say that.
Yeah.
He's the best designed Jason, I think. Like when you look at Jason,
he's a classic. I mean, like
8,
nobody except for the hardcore Friday fans who remembers names like Warrington Gillette or whatever. Kane Hodder, not only was he very fun as Jason, but he also became an ambassador for the franchise, which is inestimable. I also think a very close second would be Derek Mears in the remake.
I really like Derek Mears. Yeah. I really like.
It's a good Jason.
Parts. Yeah, I was sad he didn't get a chance to get at the character more, but there's still time. There's still time. I hope they bring him back whenever they finally figure out what they're doing with that.
You guys ever see the controversial, short-lived Swamp Thing series where he plays the Swamp Thing?
No, me and my buddy were just talking about that show and said that he's like really good.
One season.
Yeah,
I would bet you both money that you would love it and devour it in like 2 nights.
I'm a big
down.
Swamp Thing fan. I never got to it because it was buried on that DC streaming service for a long time.
Right, and then it was canceled because it was, even though it got critical praise and it looked like it was going to be a hit in some regards, it just got canceled because of financial or political reasons. Who knows? But it's a great season, and I'm not huge on comic book stuff, but I loved that Swamp Thing. How did we get into Swamp Thing? Sorry.
Hey, we chase the trail where it takes us, but
Derek Mears played Jason
Kane Hodder.
Kane
it's
Hodder.
like a 6 degrees of separation thing.
I know you're going to do it, but I just want to talk about how great it is when a normally stoic character actor gets to play like the horribly feral prison warden. Donald Sutherland in Lockup or Bob Gunton in Shawshank.
Lockup is good. I forgot about Lockup. That's the Stallone one, right?
Yeah. And this great guy, Lane Smith, you look at his name, you're like, I don't know who that is. And then you see his face and you hear one sentence, you're like, oh, that's the dad from Son-in-Law, the judge from blank, the lawyer from blank, the teacher from. He's just one of those anonymous character actors who's always great.
He rules in this movie.
I saw him for the first time in the Lois and Clark, the old Superman show with Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain. He played Perry White on that.
He's a great Perry White. I only saw that show sparingly, but what a great actor to play Perry White. Exactly.
Oh, he was great. Yeah, no, I always really liked him. Sadly, a lot of the actors in this movie have passed. So Tiny Lister is gone. Larry Flash Jenkins is gone. Lane Smith is gone. But there are just to borrow a prison term, there's a murderer's row of talent in this movie.
You guys,
well done.
Just came up on my podcast recently, but what do you know? When you see Hal Landon Jr.'s face, what do you think of?
Oh, it's Ted's dad. Yeah, it's immediately Ted's dad. Yeah,
it's so funny you'd say that. What did I just record? Like an episode, like literally last week, where Hal Landon Jr.'s name came up, and it's like, oh, it's Ted's dad.
Yeah.
Well, it was what I thought of. However, now it's going to be him, his barbed wire corpse popping through the floor and in front of Lane Smith is going to be what I picture first. I think now, that has now supplanted the image of Ted's dad.
And our female lead, the great Chelsea Field, who not only survived the debacle that was Cannon's Masters of the Universe,
Yeah.
But she has had a solid career on TV and in movies, and she's still working. She's on an NCIS show.
She's still going. Yeah, she gives a lot of like Margot Kidder energy in this movie, I think. And I wish that this movie had more for her to do, because like I immediately liked her, and then I'm immediately like, oh man, you can just kind of lift her out of this movie. Like they didn't really give her much to contribute other than like building out some exposition, you know. Well, which is a shame. Like I'm glad they were able to get at least one female cast member into this.
Yep, you could see them movie, scrambling, going. You could see the writer or the producer scrambling, going, "We need a woman in this movie somewhere. Come on, how do we do it? What is she? Is she a nurse? No, well, there's no nurse. There's no doctor. How do we do it?" And she is what is her role?
Journalist, right? Or is that that what she?
Yeah,
she's digging into some dark secrets about the prison.
Yeah.
To talk really quickly about Chelsea Fields, last week we talked about Robot Wars with Don Michael Paul, who wrote Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man, and Chelsea Fields is in that movie playing Virginia Slim.
Oh wow, I have forgotten every frame of that movie.
I would say that's a candidate for overhated, but I think it's hated about the right level.
Hey, I'm open, dude. I just did an episode on Mac and Me, so
look, I that's what I do love about your show, is that everybody has got like you can make an argument for almost any movie. I don't know if that one is. I bet somebody could find it.
It's funny, Scott, because you brought up Masters of the Universe, and Mac and Me makes me think of. I often talk about anecdotally, like not in the same year, because there's a couple of them were 87 and the others were 88, but in like a 18-month stretch, I think I forced my mom to take me to see Masters of the Universe, Mac and Me, and the Garbage Pail Kids movie in the theater.
Ooh. Oh my God.
And I'm like, and I don't
live in your house.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know how she didn't just leave me on the side of the road and drive away.
Let's just give it up for moms of aspiring movie nerds.
Yeah.
Who are like, imagine like your mom, late 20s, early 30s, whatever. She's like her 10-year-old or whatever year old son wants to see a movie. Oh, I want to make my kid happy. What are we going to see? And the kid looks up at you and says, the Garbage Pail Kids movie. Now, a mom or dad is instantly going to want to please their kid, but they're also their own person. And they're also going to think, you little son of a.
Well, it's funny you say that, Scott, because I remember when the first Ninja Turtles movie came out, and I really wanted to go see it, and neither of my parents wanted to take me, so they pawned me off on my mom's cousin, who took me to that movie, and he ended up actually loving the movie. And I remember like the two of us came back from the theater, and both me and my mom's cousin were like, "Oh, it was so fun, it was so good, blah blah blah," and both of my parents were kind of like, wait, this is not the reaction we were expecting to see from this grown adult from this Ninja Turtles movie. But we'll save our conversation on Steve Barron's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie for another time.
Oh yeah, I mean, they were probably burned on you taking the Garbage Pail.
I probably had the same exact thing, begging people to take me to Steve Barron's Electric Dreams.
Oh my God,
I saw that movie in '84. I would have been 12, and I was fortunate in that I grew up in a part of Northeast Philadelphia where we had a 2-house theater. Yeah, about a tenth of a mile. No, not a tenth, but a quarter of a mile away from my house. I mean, it was a 2-house, and I could go with my friends or my sister. I couldn't go alone, but I saw everything.
And it kickstarted your love affair with Cyrano de Bergerac.
I was obsessed with Electric Dreams for a while, and I still love the music because a lot of it's by Jeff Lynne of ELO. And it is a a silly computerized version of Cyrano. And again, we're off on another tangent.
No, I'm going to take it further because I have never seen a frame of Electric Dreams. I had no idea what it was about until this exact moment. But for some reason, we owned the soundtrack on cassette when I was a kid. So I've listened
probably because your mom or dad had good taste in music. That's why.
I can't imagine. No, my mom bought like Peruvian pan flute CDs. Like, so it must have been my dad somehow. Yeah, okay. I think it must have been my dad. But yeah. So whatever reason, I've heard the soundtrack to that like 800 million times. I've never seen a frame of the film. But I digress to a film.
You know what? If you need a modern day what's it called? Life preserver for Electric Dreams. The female lead is the great Virginia Madsen.
Oh, I do.
So it's not like you'll be completely like, who are all these people?
And we're tying it all together, sort of, because Virginia Madsen is, if I'm not mistaken, in that season of Swamp Thing.
Yes.
Oh yeah, she is. Yeah, I think so. All right.
There you go, Steve. I was just handing it right back to you somewhat.
That was
still
slick.
in the middle of a tangent, but
I mean, it's still that tangent is still tied to Derek Mears, who is like floating off in the ether there. But it's
there
enough.
There are a few tangents I enjoy more than like obscure, but not super obscure. Anything that played theatrically to a movie geek in the 80s, like they're going to remember Electric Dreams or Modern Girls.
Sure.
Or, they're going to remember it in some way. But I just love jogging the memory and going, oh my God, I haven't even thought about that was then, this is now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just those movies that like immediately trigger some kind of recognition, even if like
you saw Wisdom in theaters, like Wisdom.
You're the one.
Wind. Remember Wind? Yeah. Movies like that.
Carol,
yes, exactly.
Carol Ballard. It's not a bad film, actually.
It's not bad. No, that was not bad.
Oh, wait, Wind is actually good. I was thinking of White Squall, which is good.
Oh yeah, White Squall is the Ridley Scott one. Yeah.
Wind is
QAnon is weirdly adopted, but that's a whole other thing.
That's right. I read that a while ago. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Prison, because if we haven't adequately hyped this movie up, Prison fucking slaps. I was not really, I didn't really know what to expect. Like I said, this movie had no real reputation for me other than I knew a lot of talented people were involved. That, of course, is never an indication of exactly if it's going to be a good movie. But it's tight, it's entertaining, it's well scripted. Like the characters are vivid. The scares are really inventive.
It's nicely shot. It hasn't, it progresses quickly.
Listen, this might not be my favorite movie shot by Mac Ahlberg, but this might be the best looking movie shot by Mac Ahlberg.
It just has such a clean, like 80s, like aesthetic, where whatever reason, I always associate 80s horror movies with light coming up through the floorboards. And there's just so much of that kind of aesthetic in this entire movie, even without floorboards. It just has that kind of aesthetic. This looks like the shittiest prison in the world, which is really appropriate for what we're going for. It is supposed to be in the context of this world.
I'm sorry. I just double checked. I'm looking at Mac Ahlberg's filmography. This guy should be the patron saint of your podcast.
He really is.
So much. He
shot Dungeon Master, Trancers, Chained Heat, Ghoulies, Reanimator, From Beyond.
Co-directed Ghost Town. I think his final film, unfortunately, was Evil Bong. So he was shooting all the way up through that era.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he also shot both of the Brady Bunch movies, which are both funny.
And have some like actual clever cinematography too, because they need to go back and forth between film stocks and between staging to make one look like the sitcom world.
No, he is really, really talented. I've really grown to recognize his skill as a DP, and like he put together a hell of a career, and we've covered him a bunch of times, and we won't stop covering him.
Hollywood stuff and schlocky stuff. Rest in peace. Mac Ahlberg died at 81 years old. What a great cinematographer, really. Because I'll tell you right now, one of the things I've worked on a few indies, and I'll tell you two things that make your movie like horror fans are okay if your movie looks cheap, but they don't care for it if it looks like amateur hour. Two things that make your movie look perfect or look professional: a good image and good audio. You need a good cinematographer, and you need the color correct at the end. You need a good, audio recorder. You need good audio on set, and you need to do it in post. Every time you see something that feels like somebody's home movies, those are the two things it's lacking.
That's when you miss it. Yeah. You've got the grainy film stock, or like you could. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Like you can learn about stuff like composition and mise en scène and stuff like that.
Yes, right. And you can fix the script, and you can you can hire better actors. But if you're consistent, you must have a certain level of visual quality and audio talent, audio skill. Your movie's just gonna a very low budget film will feel like something shot in someone's backyard. There are countless super low budget films that have professional level AV, and that's what makes a film a film.
Mm-hmm.
Even a cheap low budget schlocky horror film like this. How much into the plot do you go on the show?
Oh, we cover as much as it really warrants. Like we don't need to go beat by beat, but like
I was going to ask you if one of you could describe the plot of this movie in one sentence.
It's a ghost prisoner seeks revenge on the guard that sentenced him to death. I would say that's the cleanest way to say it. There's more complications, but like, yeah, I think that's the gist of what's happening. They've unearthed this really angry spirit who is a murderer, who was, he was a falsely accused murderer in the 50s. He was executed by the head guard, played by Lane Smith, who is now the warden of the prison.
He is the governor, sir.
Oh,
he is the governor of the prisoner. The other guys are there's a guy below him who's the warden.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
He's walking around in a suit. He's not wearing, a uniform like the main warden of the prison is, but Lane Smith is the governor. And one thing I really like about how they introduce the prison in the movie is that I love the fact that we don't go beat by beat, but I think we start with a flashback. So we open up with a flashback of a dream that that the governor is having about the guilt that he's holding on to, obviously from sentencing a man to death. Really vivid, horrific dream, and I love Lane Smith's the way that he plays waking up from that dream where he's like choke. Yeah, he's like it's big, but it's big in the right way. Like it's big when it needs to be big. I think this performance is pitch perfect, especially in little moments like that. He knows to go a little bit bigger, which I really like. But we start with that.
Good. Yeah, it's especially good if you're familiar with him as an actor and know that he tends to play kind of like slick, slimy, competent bureaucrat types, like he always seems kind of unflappable, and you do get to see him like visibly fall apart over the course of this movie, which
but then what we do with we get the inmates, the plot then tells you that they're moving people to this prison. They're going to use this prison, and all of the warden, the guards, the governor, and the inmates arrive at the same time. Yes. And I like that because it feels like everyone is equally vulnerable in a way. And so I thought that was such an interesting thing. It's not like this established prison where the same crew of guards has worked and the same inmates have been forever. Everyone is new to this building. And so they're sort of like, they as they find things out, as they happen, it's so new to everyone, and there's no one really who has an understanding of, oh well, that's because down there that's the execution chamber. And I love that it was a real execution chamber. It was I believe it was a gas chamber, but they put an electric chair in it there. But I like
talking about like a haunted film set, right? Like if you want to be like actually shooting your horror movie on a site where men have actually died violently, like that's some bad juju. I do really want to call this movie out for how well it establishes this cast of characters, like very efficiently. Like it's the easiest thing in the world to get wrong in a movie like this, and so many do. But it's just like, if you've got this cast of characters, you need to make them each quickly distinct, and you need to make them each sympathetic in their own way. So you get a bunch of actors who look very interesting. They all look different. They all have their own thing, and then just give them a quick thing to establish their personality. Oh, my nickname is Lasagna. Oh,
check out this poster of Sylvester Stallone that I'm hanging up in my cell.
Yeah, like I'm like, Tiny Lister is like a big giant guy, but he's kind of like a gentle giant until he's pushed too far. You have the voodoo priest, and you have the guy who can't stop escaping. Like. You quickly establish these archetypes. They don't need to be super deep. We don't need to go into deep backstory on everybody, but we immediately know who they are. We recognize them when they show up later. We sympathize when they die, and we give a shit about the story.
I want to just say really quickly, like, it reminds me in that way, we talked about Nightmare on Elm Street, and even though Renny Harlin did part 4, a lot of the character introduction here reminds me of Dream Warriors, because I feel like when you have a B movie, you have character types. Like you have there needs to be this kind of person, this kind of person, this kind of person. And a lot of times they're very one-dimensional. And I feel like, similarly to Dream Warriors, this movie, I feel like, fleshes out these characters that could have been really one-dimensional in a way that you don't see from a lot of B movies. And so even though you're introduced to some of them for the very first time, you feel like you know them a little bit. Like, I feel like when you obviously don't know who Rabbit is when he first tries to steal the bus, But then when you're like, oh, it's Rabbit, and just from the energy that you get from him, it's like, oh, he's always running. He's always trying to get away from the prison. And that makes sense. And it's like, they're doing a lot of more character lifting here than you would in a regular B movie, I think.
It seems like Harlan wanted it to be a standard but an entertaining prison flick, and then boom, you're interrupted, like, kind of lull you into, oh, we've all seen prison films. We've all seen Birdman and Escape from Alcatraz, and we've all seen, B prison films, and we're establishing these characters. This formula. Oh, but you don't, because it's a horror film. And, I think that they do a very admirable job of just setting up a basic but entertaining prison story. And then, oh, by the way, we forgot to tell you, we almost forgot after a half an hour of setup, this is a horror film.
I
love it.
Why is it so novel to have a prison movie set a horror movie set in a prison? Like, why has this not been done?
Oh, well, here's why.
Yeah.
It's a simple answer. Very few buildings that I could ask you to be in at 3 a.m. where you as a grown adult would say, no, I refuse.
Yeah, I guess
but if I were to say, go sleep in an abandoned prison at 2 a.m. and you'd say, no, I balk on that one. Thank you.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's just so damn scary. I mean,
but that's why it's so good for a setting. It's inherently scary. It's inherently charged with all of this bad energy. It is a dangerous location before you even introduce a horror element. And then you do, like, one of my favorite things in a movie like that, I do like a good, like, single location, like, thriller where there's a group of disparate guys who need to kind of overcome their animosities and work towards some kind of, like, shared threat, and that's what this movie does very well. So a prison is just such an ideal setting.
I would love to know why this movie, I according to Wikipedia, it says that it was distributed by a company called Eden. I don't know anything about this company. And it was like a regional release. I'm almost positive it never played Philly. I think it played New York.
Movies at this time were like they would get like a 1 or 2 week theatrical release and then go straight to video because that's where the money was being made.
Right. And what's sad is that, like, if a more established distributor had seen this, I think it could have been a small, maybe not a hit, but it could have done more than, what did it make? $300,000? It made nothing.
It makes nothing.
Yeah.
As far as just like a kid in 1987 who wants to see a horror movie, an 18-year-old, 16-year-old kid, like, this is a good horror film.
Oh, I would qualify this very much as like a sleeper. Like this is one of those movies that, like, is really pretty high quality, and it's kind of amazing that more people haven't heard about it or that it hasn't really gotten more love. There is a Shout Factory DVD out.
You just read that is insane. You read my next question I just jotted down while you were talking is, do either of you have the Shout Factory Blu-ray?
No, but I think we were both talking about how, like, this is going to be a movie on regular rotation for both of us, so we might want to track it down. Because currently it is in a decent enough rendition on YouTube. You can watch the entire thing uncut on YouTube. It's VHS quality, but it's been cleaned up enough that it's.
I mainly want to hear this Renny Harlin commentary.
I absolutely want to hear that.
There's apparently a featurette or mini documentary with like a dozen people. John Carpenter.
My understanding is that the bonus features on that one are really worth having. And after seeing, so I got really lucky because Nighthawk Cinema, which is similar to Alamo Drafthouse type place that does a lot of repertory screenings, which is really close to me, just coincidentally showed Prison 2 nights ago during what they call like Ridiculous Sublime, as like the umbrella of the movies they pick to curate. And the person who came out and did the introduction to it obviously loved the movie and was talking it up beforehand. And there was a good amount of people there, like a decent crowd. I was kind of shocked how many people came out for this movie. And I was judging from the audience, like some people clearly had never seen it and were reacting to things for the first time. Other people were telegraphing some of the moments in the movie, and it was super fun. And I had such a blast watching it that way. I thought this was the best possible way I could have seen this movie for the first time.
So horror movie nerds love to have like feathers in their cap, and not in a gatekeepy way, but in a, hey, I got to see this super obscure. Find me anybody who saw Prison in a theatrical release. Find me, so like how many horror nerds on the planet have seen this in a theater? So that's like a little feather right there. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Shout out to the guys from the Flophouse, Stuart Wellington, former guest. They were all there.
Yeah,
I love those guys. That's awesome. I wish I had seen that. That would have been fun.
Yeah, but this is the kind of movie that kind of gives me the biggest pop and kind of gets me the most excited about doing this show, because this is the kind of little discovery that you hope you're going to find. And like most of the time we're going digging and we're kind of coming up with
and you're used to like kind of half knocking and half praising a movie, or even apologizing in a way for liking ineptitude or something that's partially inept. And in this case, you're just like, this is just a good B horror movie. Period.
This is just good. Yeah, I don't think there's any ineptness to it. I think it fits the, is it Howard Hawks's expression for a good movie? 3 good scenes, no bad ones. It's got that. Yeah, it meets that requirement. I think Viggo Mortensen, I am very surprised he didn't like blow up sooner. I know this movie wasn't seen very much, but like I think he went from this to movies like The Indian Runner, and then he had little bits in like Crimson Tide, G.I. Jane, things like that. Lots of villain roles. But you look at him in this, when so many of the Empire and Full Moon movies that we talked about, and I say this all the time, have very disposable male leads. And here's a guy who's got genuine charisma, like a real air of cool, and he feels like he's bringing something to this role.
Yeah, when you're making a low budget horror movie, a lot of times your casting is like panning for gold. Yeah, you're like, that's a pretty big chunk. Oh, that one, they could do a nice job. And then you see a guy like this, and you're like, jackpot! Holy crap!
Well, my understanding is that he was the last person to audition, and the producers had somebody in mind. They wanted to actually initially cast Tom Matthews from Return of the Living Dead and Friday the 13th 6.
Right, Tommy in part 6, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they that was who they had in mind, who they initially wanted, because I think they said he's young, he's handsome, he's blonde. Renny Harlin said, I want a James Dean type guy for this movie. And I think they thought, okay, well, let's keep this guy in mind. And that's kind of who was floating around in their heads. And then Viggo Mortensen was the last person who auditioned, I should say, for them. And he came in and they saw him and went, oh, okay, sir. Hello. And then he started talking, and his energy, they immediately, Erwin Yablans, I believe, says also, like, we knew immediately. They had a Mulholland Drive moment where he looked up and said, this is the guy.
I mean, yeah, he really does manage to walk that line between like inherently kind and sympathetic, but he has that edge. He does feel just like a little dark and a little scary, and like you do believe that he's in prison for a reason, even if he's not like a downright evil man. So I think that's a fantastic performance. I think the kill sequences in this are
so fun.
Real precursors to what he was able to do with Nightmare 4. They're really elaborate. They don't necessarily go in the directions you think they're going to go. And here's my favorite part. They completely eschew the tropes that you would expect. Like, these are not all necessarily prison themed deaths, but they are deaths that couldn't happen anywhere else. Like, nobody is getting stuck in like the license plate making machine, nobody's getting like shanked by a ghost. Like, they're avoiding a lot of these stereotypes while still making it feel like, yeah, this is a death that could only happen in this situation.
Here or in the Mangler.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely...
How many other horror movies set in prisons can you think of?
Oh God, like off the top of my head, like Ghost or a Zombie Prison is, what's the name of that one? It's like the Italian one from the late 80s. Is it just called Zombie Prison?
It could be. To me, I mean, there might be some that have parts of them that are filmed.
Reanimated 3 takes place in a prison. I think it's Beyond. Is it Beyond?
Okay.
Second one's Bride, third one's Beyond, I think.
I'm seeing
yes, Beyond Reanimated. Yeah, it's the third one.
Dead Man Walking. I guess technically the first 2 seasons of Walking Dead are all in a jail.
But none of them.
Great neo-noir called Brute Force that might.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I got one.
Oh, go for it.
It's kind of an offbeat pick, but I think the ultimate prison set horror film has to be Alien 3.
Oh, of course, Alien 3. Jesus Christ. Literally the movie that consumes all my thoughts. I cannot believe I didn't pull Alien 3 off of that. That's a good
No,
point.
but the prison works so well as a character of this movie. That's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it really does here. And you're totally right, Steve. The kills don't go in the direction you think they are. Like we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the barbed wire scene.
Yeah.
And so the barbed wire scene starts
really effective. Really
yeah, you watch it and you're like, okay, cool. I see where this is going. The barbed wire is moving on its own. It's gonna strangle him, or it's gonna hang him, or it's gonna keep him and hold him in place, or tie him to the chair. The one
any of which would have been fine for a lot of directors. Any one of those gags would have been fine. But
the idea that the barbed wire is making a Rube Goldberg machine to fire his shotgun at him first is hilarious. And then it's like, it is man, let me tell you, the live crowd of people who've never seen the movie before, when the cut to what the barbed wire is actually doing happened, was this amazing gasp from people. I love that. Because you could not possibly
never on DVD for the longest time. It was almost impossible to find throughout most of the. I mean, all right, it was a VHS release, fine, so you could rent it. But I'd say once the VHS era kind of died from the 90s on to until the Shout Factory, this movie was hard to find.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, no, it's still not streaming anywhere except on YouTube in the unofficial form. So, I mean, it's a real shame. You see that sequence and it's just like, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, did not expect it to go with the shotgun. And then I think, like, you see the barbed wire tightening. You think, oh, okay, is it going to decapitate him? And then shooting him up through the ceiling to be in and revealing that they're just below the governor's office is great. And it really kind of reinforces these are all for you. I mean, and then Rabbit's death when he gets caught in the pipes, like the fact that we see some of it, but the real juice is when we see the aftermath. You know, like it starts dripping into the mashed potatoes, and then this inhuman blob of like guts and metal and steel falls out of the ceiling, and like you could see that there are some human bits in there. Like, really great makeup effect. I mean, Larry Flash Jenkins getting fried in his cell was like so grotesque. And
we have to take a moment, like while we're talking about the stars of the film. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. You're good.
I apologize because I just thought of it. But before we move on,
please,
let's take a moment to talk about the late, great, amazing John Carl Buechler.
Oh, yeah.
We take nothing but moments to talk about John Carl Buechler. I feel like every chance we get, there's been a lot of movies that he's had his hand in here. And yeah, I mean, we love the guy. And
Empire's in-house monster and gore guy. For years, I think he did probably 20, 25 films with them, but he also did outside of Empire and Charles Band. So many like the Savinis and the Rick Bakers and the Rob Botins, they get and deserve so much credit for what they've done in the world of fantastic films. But, a lot of times guys like Buechler are like the next level that don't often get, except by people like us. Just so much fun. Carnosaur. That might be my favorite John Carl Buechler creation. I love
Carnosaur. Yeah. Carnosaur is so insane.
The reveal of Rabbit, though, when he falls through the ceiling, that makeup work there is so good. I mean, this movie rules.
Yeah.
You
could see these elaborate moments of him like showing, look, we can do this on very limited funds, and because that barbed wire sequence. You could just imagine another director being like, "Ugh, this is taking forever." It just comes up behind him, and we shoot a noose in silhouette. Done. And no, Renny Harlin and John Carl Buechler said, "No, we're going to make it crazy, elaborate, difficult, and fun." Love it.
And I mean, I just also want to highlight a moment late in the movie that really kind of emphasizes how good Renny Harlin is at setting up these efficient stakes. When Tiny Lister's character gets gut shot with a shotgun while trying to negotiate some kind of peace, and then before dying goes into a rage, kills the guard by throwing him over his head and then dying. that's kind of an incredible moment because it's A, over the top and ridiculous, and B, also like pretty affecting because we know this guy, we know that he is trying to be peaceful, we know that he's been fighting against these urges that have landed him in prison, and the last act that he does before he dies is a violent act of revenge. So there's like pathos there, and Tiny Lister plays it really well, and it's still silly and entertaining as hell. Like that's such a weird little line to walk in this movie, and the fact that they put in that much effort for a late period Empire movie and kind of thought about these things in this way, I think kind of makes this movie stand out to me.
No, I totally agree with you. One thing that stands out to me,
treasure, man. There's nothing like you guys love just covering the movies, good, bad, or awful. You love covering a movie per episode and talking about what kind of history, what kind of actors, cinematographer, who worked on it, who wrote it, and it might be a movie you just don't even like, but we're still, as genre nuts, we still enjoy talking about them. But every once in a while, you're like, this is so much better than I expected, and it's like it literally is like finding treasure.
Exactly. No, it really did feel like a discovery. You know, we've had that a few times with this show. We've talked about Shrunken Heads and Blood Dolls, and like Pit and the Pendulum is one of them, I think, for me. Like there are a couple of these movies where like, oh, it's like, where the fuck did that come from? Like, how did I miss this for so long? And this is really those.
I had a good full moon Empire week. I watched another movie, a full moon movie that I had never seen before, that I only knew from reputation, and I won't say what it is. We'll save that for when we eventually cover it. But I remember being like, I've heard pretty good things about this one. I'm going to throw this one on. I was shocked immediately by the level of artistry and quality of it, to the point where I watched it and I went, you know what? That just kind of shot up near the top of my list. Yeah. Like almost that same kind of feeling I had when I watched, I knew about Subspecies as a series and I always kind of avoided them. And then I watched the first movie first and went, that was better than I expected. And then I watched the second movie and went, wow, this is really good. That was the feeling I had watching this movie, which we'll talk about probably in a few months. But yeah, it's amazing. It's rewarding to find those.
It's Ghoulies 3, isn't it? It's Ghoulies 3.
It's the Ghoulies go to
it is. It's the Kane Hodder connection of it all is what it is.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I think we've kind of I mean, I've exhausted all of my notes on this, and I know that if I open up this cage, I'm going to continue going down multiple tangents and everything. I haven't even talked. Okay, this is the one last one I'm going to throw in.
I have one last one too, but go ahead, Steve.
I grew up in a prison town. The town in Colorado where I lived, the whole industry was prison. We had 14 different prisons, including the federal supermax where like the 9/11 terrorists and like Timothy McVeigh were kept. Wow. So that's all in my hometown. And we have an old prison there that's about as old as this one that you see in here. It still has like the stones and bricks and everything like that. And you could still like take tours and everything. And that's all I wanted to throw in.
It's my understanding that my hometown became a prison in 1997.
Oh yeah, so I've heard that. Yeah.
I don't want to say anything because I'm from Philadelphia, but we have lots of prisons and several that have been featured in movies.
Yeah, one or two.
Yeah, one thing I did want to point out and highlight though is that we've said, Viggo Mortensen obviously really captivating, really great in this movie, immediate charisma. I feel like he's electrifying. You can't take your eyes off him when he's on screen. I feel that way about Lane Smith too in this movie. Like I feel like he's so captivating in this movie. But it should be pointed out also, Kane Hodder does say that Viggo Mortensen insisted on doing all of his own stunts. So when he is climbing on the prison wall, holding on to the barbed wire, that is not a stunt man. That is Viggo Mortensen doing all of his stunts for that scene. And they were kind of saying like, wow, like this guy's the whole package because he's handsome, he can act, and he was incredibly athletic, they said. And Kane Hodder said, it's him. He did some stuff, but then all that stuff is all Viggo, which I think is super cool.
I mean,
I believe that 100%.
Right? Didn't he lose some teeth and like break his foot and a couple things on Lord of the Rings? Like he's one of those guys. He just does all his own stunts.
I believe it's true, but yeah, it's common knowledge. But sometimes common knowledge can be apocryphal too. But it's common knowledge that like when he kicked that helmet in Fellowship, he broke a toe.
Yeah, and then kept rolling, and that's allegedly the take you see in the film.
But
I
he's
think
in a lot of ways
Oh,
kind of like, I don't know the man, but I've read about him, and he is like a free spirit type where he's like, all right, what do I got to do? The character has to climb that wall and climb over there. Yeah, I'll do it. He just, I buy it. I buy that.
Well, pretty difficult to have a stuntman for Eastern Promises, I think.
Yes,
point. Yeah.
God, he's so good in Eastern Promises. Yeah, that's an
great
amazing
movie.
I love all of his.
He's always good, and
he's always good. Even like I was looking at his Oscar nominations. He's got 3 Oscar nominations, and 2 of them are for movies I actively don't like, but I still don't begrudge him those nominations. It's like
your listeners are going to want to know what those 3 films are.
Oh, so his 3 are Eastern Promises, which rules, Green Book, which is terrible, and Captain Fantastic, which is terrible. So, you know, but he's like good in them, and I was like, I can't even be mad.
Yeah, he's not terrible.
No, he's not the problem with those. But yeah, so I think we have reached the end of our prison sentence. I've had such a great time talking about this movie. Scott, we're so excited to have you back. Thank you so much for bringing this one to our attention and for coming on and talking about it. Where can people find all of your podcasts, your writing, all the stuff that you've been up to?
Well, there is a public feed for Overhated, but if you want the full experience, go to patreon.com/Scott E. Weinberg. It'll be in the notes. It's easier to spell than it sounds. And on my Patreon, you'll find 180 episodes of Overhated, and a few episodes of a new show called Horror Yearbook that I'm doing with my friend Ben Rock, where each of us pick a year, and then I build a list of every horror film that came out that year, mainly theatrical, but we also do include video stuff because why wouldn't you? And I believe one of or both of you have heard Horror Yearbook and you liked it.
Yes,
I love
absolutely.
it. I love the concept. It's so much fun. I know you did 1996 and you did 1980. And remind me again, Scott, the name of your co-host?
Ben Rock.
Ben Rock. I was getting flustered at times when he would admit on mic that he had never heard of a movie you mentioned.
Yeah, no, Ben knows his stuff, but even for people like that, you know, I don't know if he had seen Prison, let's say. But the great thing about Ben is that he knows his stuff. He's very well-spoken. And when he doesn't know something like me, he just says, I don't know.
Yeah. No, he does. He's very forward.
Nothing worse than like a faker who tries to fake it.
Right.
You know, like no horror nerd, no movie nerd knows everything. You don't, you know, like I consider myself kind of an expert in specifically 80s genre stuff, but I guarantee you there's stuff that you could both teach me that I haven't seen yet. I may have heard of it, but you know, you guys are experts on the Bandiverse, and there's lots of stuff there that I haven't seen. There's lots of episodes. So I'm rambling.
A lot of tendrils,
No, Horror Yearbook is a lot of fun, and you should all check it out. I'm sure everybody would like it. If you like what we do, jump onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star rating and maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined. You can find us on all social media, on Instagram at puppetmasters_Castle Freaks. You can follow me personally at _Giallo_Jerry and Steve at Minotaur Matador. We're on X and Threads and Blue Sky and all of those places. If you just search the name of the show, you will find it. And I just want to also shout out listeners in the UK. Our audience in the UK has grown significantly, I would say, over the last 3 to 4 months, which is pretty amazing. So if you found the show across the pond, as they say, thank you so much for tuning in.
We are not.
What's that?
I said, what's all this then?
Yeah, I don't know.
My favorite British phrase. What's all this then?
Yeah, I would like to know, what is all this then? But this is not all this then that Steve has going on. Well, that was a smooth segue. Steve,
that was good. You're on fire.
What other show would you like to plug today while you have the opportunity?
Well, I also do a show called Cinemarcade, and that's the podcast where we are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies. We're wrapping up a Rocky series right now. We've got some interesting stuff coming up on everything from like the Da Vinci Code to Pixar stuff to
I have a nomination.
Jumanji. Yeah, whoa, what do you got?
I have a request. We're going to be I'm doing a commentary with 2 other podcasts next month on 1983's Krull.
Krull. It is a early PC game. Yeah, Krull is going to be on the show.
It's Atari 2600 one also.
Oh, there's a 2600 as well. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
And I believe it was actually published by Atari, not a third party. So
nice.
You should be able to find it.
I wonder how well those glaives look in those little pixels. I'm curious to see that. Yeah, but we'll be getting to that one for sure. That's going to be a lot of fun.
What are we getting to next week, Steve?
Hey everyone, it's Steve jumping in again. If you're playing the home game, take a shot because we have changed the next episode. That's right. We had some conflicts coming up with the availability of the film and with the availability of our guests. So we're mixing it up. We're rolling with the punches. Instead of the previously announced mystery movie we were going to cover, we're actually going to be talking about 2 films. We're covering the entire Film Monsters series. So that is Frankenstein Reborn and The Werewolf Reborn. 2 very interesting, very short movies that we're going to be getting into with my good friend John Golson. It's going to be a lot of fun. So do check that out next week wherever you get your podcast. Thank you guys. Bye.